I'm going to the next. Oh my God. Oh no, I think I just lost everything. I just lost everything. I lost all my recordings. What is going on? Oh no. Oh no. The GRE. Dun dun dun. Why do I have to do this stupid test? Well, yes, because. And there is some reasons for that, by the way. One is that this way you can have an apples-to-apples comparison across all applicants to a graduate program in terms of a measure of their generalized intelligence. And they are pretty good predictors of graduate school success. So that's why you have to do them, although stay tuned, you may not have to do it. Which means you can send just one set of scores that you choose. So if you've taken it 3 times, the second time was your best scores, you can choose to just show them your second administration. They won't see any of the others. But you have to send them the whole administration, right? So if the first time I do really well on math, and the second time I do really well on verbal, I can't pick and choose which subtest I'm going to send. I have to send the whole administration if I use the score select, all right? Okay. How is this test structured? There's 3 primary sections: analytical writing, verbal, and quantitative reasoning. Analytical writing is all given at once, and you have 2 writing tasks that are 30 minutes each, so it's an hour-long writing component. And then the verbal and quantitative are broken up into 2 sections, 2 separate sections, each with 20 questions per section. For the verbal, you get 30 minutes per section. For the quantitative, you get 35 minutes per section. The GRE general test is not scored in a manner that you're used to. Normally, the way a test is scored, right, is you add up your total number correct, and that's your score, right? And everybody gets the same test, right? Like when you're in your classes, you all get the same test, you have the total number correct, and that's how you get your grade. That's not how it works with the GRE, because the GRE uses a computer adaptive test administration, such that everyone who takes the test gets a slightly different version of the test. Okay, the way this works is, you're taking the test. You're given a question that's of moderate, and we see here level of difficulty of the questions here is on the y-axis. Your first question is going to be of moderate difficulty. If you get that question correct, it'll give you a slightly harder question. And whereas if you get the question wrong, you're going to get a easier question, right? That's the computer adaptive part of it, okay? Same thing for the remaining questions. Let's say we're branching. Let's say, for the sake of the example, we got the first question wrong. Well, now we're going to have this bottom question here next, the less difficult one. Say we get that right, and that's going to give us a more difficult one. If we get this one wrong, less difficult, wrong, less difficult, on and on and on until you've completed all 30 of all 20 of the questions. Okay. So what you'll notice, this is for both the verbal and the quantitative reasoning sections. So what you'll notice is how you perform on the early items can have a pretty big influence on where you end up, right? So if you were to, for whatever reason, tank the first 5 items, there won't be much opportunity to go up from there, right? That being said, you don't want to be like too freaked out by this, because you can kind of get in your head. You can kind of get in your own head with this. If you think too deeply into this, where like you spend too much time on the initial questions. That's what I did. I spent way too much time on the initial questions the first time I took the GRE, and I totally bombed. It was awful. I bombed. I thought my life was over. Everything I had worked for, I would never achieve. And then I took it a week later, and my scores were fine. So that's something to watch out for, is getting into your own head as you take these tests, okay? All right. Questions about the computer adaptive protocol? Does that make sense? All right, let's get into the different sections. The first section we'll talk about is the writing section. Again, there's the analytical writing section of the GRE has two different tasks: an analyze an issue task and an analyze an argument task. You're going to do both of them, and you're going to have 30 minutes to complete each one. For the analyze an issue task, you're going to be given a general statement and asked to, provide your opinion and your thoughts on whatever issue brought up. So this will make more sense when we look at an example. So this is an official example of an analyze an issue prompt. As people rely more and more on technology to solve problems, the ability of humans to think for themselves will surely deteriorate. And you're prompted to write a response in which you discuss the extent to which you agree or disagree with the statement, explaining your reasoning for your position, in developing and supporting your position with evidence and reason. You should consider ways in which the statement may or may not hold true and explain how these considerations shape your position. So that's how the analyze an issue prompt goes. And then there's also an analyze an argument writing prompt. Again, you have to do both of these, analyze an issue and an argument. Assesses ability to understand, analyze, and evaluate arguments. Okay. Given a brief passage where somebody is making an argument, and your goal is to find the holes in the argument. So here's an example of one of these prompts. Over the past year, our late night news program has devoted increased time to national news and less time to weather and local news. During this time period, most of the complaints received from viewers were concerned with our station's coverage of weather and local news. In addition, local businesses that used to advertise during our late night news program have just canceled their advertising contracts with us. Therefore, in order to attract more viewers to the program and to avoid losing any future advertising revenues, we should restore the time devoted to weather and local news to its former level. So write a response in which you discuss what evidence is needed to evaluate the argument and how that evidence would weaken or strengthen the argument. Let's take a moment and think about this. Moving next into verbal. Verbal, 2 sections, 20 questions per section, 30 minutes per section. There are 3 types of verbal comprehension questions. There's reading comprehension, text completion, sentence equivalence. Let's start first with reading comprehension. There are 3 different varieties of response options for the reading comprehension questions. Okay, there's the traditional multiple choice format where you pick the best answer. Multiple choice, select one or more answers that are the best answers, and then select in passage where you actually click the passage that you just read to answer the question. Or click a part of the passage you just read to answer the question. Okay. And we'll look at examples of all 3 of these. Yeah, the passage is terrible. Hey, if you didn't know what the hell the answer was, I'm a psychologist with a PhD, and I had no freaking clue. So we're all good. I had to consult my notes. All right. That's one type of question. The next type of question, to add another layer to this fun. Yeah, the next type of question is select one or more answer choices. Consider each of the three choices separately and select all that apply. The passage suggests that extensive use of sequestration would over time have which of the following consequences? Great question. The question was, what does sequestration mean? Great question. So so sequestration is when you sequester things, and but it is a great question because if you knew what sequestration means, hold on, let me make my point. In order to answer this question, you have to know the meaning of the word sequestration, right? You have to have that. There's no phone a friend. Sequestration means to sequester, to make separate, to put in a different area, something along those lines. I don't know the official definition. Someone look it up, all right? What is sequestration? Someone give me I'm going to phone a friend. What's the definition of sequestration? Sequestration. Sounds French. What is it? Isolate or hide away. Sequestration means isolate or hide away. So extensive use of isolating carbon dioxide emissions would over time have which of the following consequences? The burning of fossil fuels would eventually cease to produce atmospheric accumulations of carbon dioxide. The proportion of the delivered price of electricity due to generation would rise and then decline. Power plants would consume progressively lower quantities of fossil fuels. And you have to pick one or more of these answers. Let me just double check the answer. How many think A? And then you could also keep your hand raised if you think B. And how many think C? The answer is B, and B only. So it's cool. It's cool. We'll I'm telling you, I'm going to ease the tension in a moment. It's going to be all good. So that is the multiple choice question. Select one or more. In this case, it was one, but it could be one or more of the options. It could be all three, potentially. I know, it's ridiculous. Who thinks of this stuff? Probably it is a psychologist, actually. Then there's the sample, select, and passage question. Okay, so this is going to be something like, select a sentence that explains why an outcome of sequestration that might have been expected. That's not how you say it? I don't know. I didn't get the pronunciation from Max. I just got the definition, all right? Oh. What's that? No. Yeah, it's too late for me. That might have been expected would not occur. Okay, so the sentence that explains why an outcome of sequestration that might have been expected would not occur. Yeah, this sentence. It's this. Oh, I like the engagement. That's excellent. So what you would do is you would click on one of the sentences, okay? And you click on this, it would highlight it, and then that would be your answer when you hit next, okay? All right. Next type of question for the verbal section. Text completion. Text completion. Yep. Sorry for the cringy moment. All right. Include a passage composed of 1 to 5 sentences with 1 to 3 blanks, a single correct answer consisting of one choice for each blank. You receive no credit for partially correct answers. Man, this sounds terrible. It wasn't like this when I took it. I mean, it's all good though. You guys will be fine. Okay, so it's going to be something like this. For each blank, select one entry from the column, right? So we have this blank. Pointer. Okay, we have this blank. You pick one of these three. Second blank, you pick one of these three. Third blank, you pick one of these three. So go ahead and read through this question. Take about a minute and come up with an answer. All right. Survey says. Okay. So blank one is overshadowed. Blank two, obscure. And blank three for the money is certainty of our entitlement. I'm just kidding. It's superficiality of our theories. So you'd have to get all three of these correct in order to get credit, okay?
One out of two for the other question, and I got all of this right. So I can go.
Good. Yes. All right. The last GRE verbal reasoning type of question is sentence equivalence. A single sentence, one blank, and 6 answer choices. Why 6? It couldn't be 4? Come on. You know why it's 6? Because the questions require you to select 2 out of the 6 answer choices that would work in the blank. And you receive no credit for partially correct answers. You got to pick both of them. So here's an example. Again, you have to pick 2 answer choices that complete this sentence and produce sentences that are alike in meaning. So you're going to pick 2 of these items here. Man, it's a tough one. I think I got it. I feel like I'm being tricked. All right. The answer is original and innovative. See, it's getting. That is the key, though. All you got to do is memorize vocabulary, and you're good. Well, that's cool. That works too. Hold on, hold on. I got to teach you how to take it. We haven't gotten there yet. Everything is easy if you have a plan. All right, let's get into your favorite in my section, my favorite section, quantitative. This is going to be super depressing, but we'll be all right. The other thing that I think everyone should keep in mind is the way these are scored. It's not scored like a traditional test, right? Where it's like, I need to get 20 right to get an A, right? 20 out of 20 right to get an A. All right? It may be that people who get half the questions right actually do really well. Okay, so keep that in mind. It's not like a traditional test like you're used to, where you're graded on the percentage correct that you get. All right, but into quantitative reasoning. 4 types of quantitative reasoning questions. Multiple choice, traditional, where you select one choice. Multiple choice, select one or more answer choices. Numeric entry, where you enter a number, any number that you can think of. And then quantitative comparison questions. I hope I wrote the answers down. All right, so here's the multiple choice question. Select one answer choice. Select one answer that is the best answer. Oh, crap. I don't have the answers for these. No. I don't have the answers. I can't believe I don't have the answers. So what we need for this question is, how do we calculate the area of a circle? Is it pi r squared? So that illustrates how, if you know the formulas, that helps a lot. So you got to memorize the formula. No, pi r squared. And you do you do have a calculator for this task, by the way, too. So we have 3.14 times the radius squared. Radius is 6, so what's 3.14 times 36? What does that equal? Someone calculate it. Oh wait, we have pi's there. Oh boy. Okay. But what does this work out to? So call it 113.04. And then now, what percentage of the circle? I'm doing this on the fly. I hope I'm doing this correctly. What percentage of the shaded area of the circle? What percentage of the circle is a shaded area? So if this is 160, that's 160. That's 320, right? The whole circle is 360, right? 360 degrees in a circle. Minus 320 is 40. So this must be 20 degrees. That must be 20 degrees. Then use trig. I don't know trig, so I'm not going to do trig. Here's how I would do it. Oh, that's true. Triangles. Trig. Right? Anyway. So if this is 40 degrees out of 360, and that's, what is it, 11%? And 11% of 113 is about 11. And if pi is 3.14, then it's about 3 something. So I'd say E. I have no idea. Well, we'll never know. All right. Here's another example of a multiple choice question. Select one or, yes. It has to do with quantitative reasoning. Yeah. You lose your mind. All right. Select one or more answer choices. Each employee of a certain company is either in Department X or Department Y. Oh my God. Yeah, the point is you just pick two of these and the two are correct. Oh, wow. Yeah, select. I'm sorry, you select one or more. Yes, they may all be relevant. And there's how many? Oh my God, there are 7 options. This is ridiculous. This question just makes me angry. I'm skipping it. Oh God. Here we go. Numeric entry. And I don't have the answers down. Oh. Yeah, I don't know the answer. Is it 2? Yeah, so point is you enter in the numeric value, and if you don't remember stuff you learned in high school, which by the time you take the GRE will have been 8 years prior to taking the GRE, you're kind of SOL. Okay. I have no idea what the negative first power means. 1 over 10. No, there's one more. It's depressing me. I can't look at it anymore. It's all right. We'll get into somewhere I know the answers in a moment. Quantitative comparison questions. We have quantity A, quantity B, and what you're going to pick is one of these 4 options. The last option being the relationship cannot be determined from the information given. I don't know. I'll. Is it D? All right. Okay. There's a way of knowing it. We'll talk about it later. So, well, this is how this question works. I'm sorry I forgot to put in the answers for these. Although it is, I guess, a little bit funnier this way. All right. I don't know the answer. All right. So what we're going to do next, backing up a bit. So we can consider this first test score that you get, this first test administration, as a measure of where you're at right now. You know, if you were to take the GRE today, like how would you do? Okay. What I'm going to do next is go through, for example, the verbal questions one at a time. I'm going to give you the relevant vocabulary, words, and definitions. And then you're going to see how you do and potentially change your answer, okay? Once you know the vocabulary words, as a way of simulating what taking the test would be like if you memorized a large list of words for the GRE. In other words, if you studied for it, okay? So basically retake this question while looking at the vocabulary words and their definitions. Reticent here is in italics because it's actually part of the question text, not one of the options. But in case you didn't know what reticent meant. And if you decide to change your answer, just be sure to use a different, mark or something like that. Like maybe you put triangles around the answers that you change them to. So you can differentiate between your initial responses and then your responses after seeing the terms in this case. Take about a minute and determine if you would change your answers to this question. And if so, how would you change them? All right. You all locked in? Should I tell you the answers now or wait till the end? So the answers are C, D, and G. Okay, so if you had C, D, and G, you got this one correct. If you didn't have all three of the blanks correct, then it would be marked as wrong. Okay? So keep track of whether you got it correct initially, and then whether or not you got it correct the second time around. Okay? So this is question 2. We locked in. So the answers to this one are C, D, and G. Okay. All right. The next questions were based on a passage. So I've given you the terms and definitions for some of the higher level vocabulary in here. So this is the first part of the passage, and we'll move on to the second part of the passage. All right, and now we'll answer the two reading comprehension questions. See if you change your answers to the final two verbal comprehension items. You guys locked in? So number 9 is E, and number 10 is B. E as in Edward, B as in boy. All right. I hesitate to ask, how many of you did better the second time around? No. On the 5, your score out of 5. How many of you did better the second time around? How many of you did worse? Indifferent. Really? Okay. Maybe you all just did really good to start. We'll see. All right. Next, we
Okay, in
have
this
the math
figure,
questions.
we have two parallel lines, and we want to know
And
which
what
one's
I
bigger.
have here
Column
on
A,
the slide,
column B,
the math questions
X
are pretty
plus
easy
Y,
if you
and
know what
W
you're
plus
doing.
Z.
I guess that's
So
self-explanatory.
one thing to notice here is if we call this
So
angle
all
A
of these
degrees,
questions were taken
X
from
plus
this
A plus
GRE
Y is
practice
equal to
book
180.
published by the test
Z
maker.
plus W plus A is
And there's this
also equal
website
to
on YouTube called
180.
Magoosh, GRE, MAGOOSHGRE. And they have little clips where they go over how to answer all of these questions. So what I'm going to do is play this clip, and I'm going to stop it before you're given the answer, and see if it having some background information on how to complete the question influences your score.
Which one's bigger? A, column B, X plus Y, and W plus Z. So what we notice here is if we call this angle A degrees, X plus A plus Y is equal to 180. Z plus W plus A is also equal to 180.
Okay, so now with that background information, see if that changes your answer. Does it change any of your answers? Okay, so the answer is C. Oh, there you go. Happy days. And we
Okay,
can
in this
we'll watch the
figure,
whole
we
video here
have two
to
parallel
illustrate why.
lines, and we want to know which one's bigger.
No, we'll
Column
watch
A,
it.
column B, X plus Y, and W plus Z. So one thing to notice here is if we call this angle A degrees, X plus A plus Y is equal to 180. Z plus W plus A is also equal to 180. So whatever A is, just subtract it out. You know that the sum of X plus Y has to be equal to Z plus W. If you don't see that, you can always just plug in a value for A. You get 40. Therefore, X plus Y is 140. W plus Z, this is a triangle. These three have to equal up to 180. That would also be 140. Plug in a different number, plug in 50, plug in 60. These will always be the same. You don't have to plug in forever. Plug in two different numbers and you should see a pattern emerging. But of course, you can just look at this originally and see, hey, look, that a straight line here, or we have a triangle with these three angles. They both add up to 180. Just take out the A, therefore what's left over. Z plus W, W plus Z is the same as X plus Y. And our answer is C.
All right. Next one.
In this question, we have these two repeating decimals, A and B. We have 0.717 with a bar over it, means that repeats, 717, etc. B, same thing, except for it's simply 0.71 with a bar over it, so that repeats. So I notice here I've written out 6 numbers.
Does that change your answer? We'll watch the whole thing.
In this question, we have these two repeating decimals, A and B. We have 0.717 with a bar over it, means that repeats, 717, etc. B, same thing, except for it's simply 0.71 with a bar over it, so that repeats. So notice here I've written out 6 numbers. And what else do I notice? Well, the fourth number here is a 1. Fourth number here is a 7. Otherwise, they're identical. So therefore, 7 is greater than the 1. So therefore, A must be greater.
Super freaking easy if you know what those little figures mean, right? Those little dashes mean.
Okay, in this question we
All
have
right, we'll
A
do the next one.
minus B over A plus B, and it equals 2. We're also given the information that B equals 1, so we can just plug B in to right here. We get A minus 1 over A plus 1 is equal to 2. Okay, in this question we have A minus B over A plus B, and it equals 2. We're also given the information that B equals 1, so we can just plug B in to right here. We get A minus 1 over A plus 1 is equal to 2. Multiply both sides by A plus 1. Make sure to keep the parentheses there, it's important. Get A minus 1 is equal to 2A plus 2. Subtract A from both sides. We have A here. Subtract minus 2 from both sides. And that gives us negative 3. That is A is negative 3. Or answer E.
So you use deductive reasoning to plug in the values. Yeah, that works too. It's basic algebra too, right? It's like, oh, if I just remembered the basic algebra, this would be super easy.
Okay, this is a long, complex problem. So let's start and make sure to organize everything here, because organization is key
All right,
in
next
long
one.
problems. So 180 judges, 30% were women. 30% W, 25% were from minority groups. So I'm going to
Perfect.
say MG for minority groups. And then it says 1/9 of the women appointed were from minority groups. 1/9 appointed. And they want to know how many were neither women. So neither women, that's easy. Male, right? Male. How many were male and not from minority groups? So we want male plus not from minority groups. So a good way to go about dealing with these numbers is setting up a little grid like this. And we're going to have females, males, minority group, non-minority group. We're going to take this information on the left here and we're going to plug it in accordingly. So first off, 30% are women or 30% are females. And let me actually change that to a W, otherwise the WF thing is going to be confusing. Women and men. Okay, 30% are women. 30% of 180 is 54. 3 times 18, 54. Cut off both zeros. Quick and easy way of doing it. Okay, so 54 women total means there's 126 men left because there's 180 total. Okay, now we know 25% are from minority groups, but we actually want to jump across that because we have this nice number here. It's not just percent here, but we have this fraction that tells us specifically the women appointed were from minority groups. So we can actually come in here and put in a specific number. 1/9 of the 54, or that's a 6, were from minority groups, meaning that 48 were from non-minority groups. Now we can take this next information that 25% were from minority groups. Okay, well that's great because 1/4 of 180 is 45. And so we know that minority groups, this plus this, has to equal Okay, this is a long, complex problem. So let's start and make sure to organize everything here because organization is key on these long problems. So 180 judges, 30% were women. It's 30% W. 25% were from minority groups. So I'm going to say MG for minority groups. And then it says 1/9 of the women appointed were from minority groups. 1/9 appointed. And they want to know how many were neither women. So neither women, that's easy. Male, right? Male. How many were male and not from minority groups? So we want male plus not from minority groups. It's a good way to go about dealing with these numbers is setting up a little grid like this. And we're going to have female, male.
That was one of the harder
Minority
questions.
group, non-minority group. We're going to take this information on the left here and we're going to plug it in accordingly. So first off, 30% are women or 30% are females. And let me actually change that to a W, otherwise the WF thing is going to be confusing. But women and men. Okay, 30% are women. 30% of 180 is 54. 3 times 18, 54. Cut off both zeros. Quick and easy way of doing it. Okay, so 54 women total means there's 126 men left because there's 180 total. Okay, now we know 25% are from minority groups, but we actually want to jump across that because we have this nice number here. It's not just percent here, but we have this fraction that tells us specifically the women appointed were from minority groups. So we can actually come in here and put in a specific number. 1/9 of the 54, or that's a 6, were from minority groups, meaning that 48 were from non-minority groups. Now we can take this next information that 25% were from minority groups. Okay, well that's great because 1/4 of 180 is 45. And so we know that minority groups, this plus this, has to equal 45. We have 6, so we know that 39 are going to be males in the minority groups. We actually want to know, again, men that are not minority groups. So this box right here, 126 total men, minus the 39 that are in the minority groups, gives us 87, or answer choice C.
And then the last one here.
Okay, we have 3.7, 4.1, we have A, we have 8.5, 9.2, and we have 2A. The key here, these are in ascending order, so smallest and greatest. So for instance, what does that mean? Well, I can't come in here and say, well, A is 4, because it has to be greater than 4.1. I also can't come in here and say A is 4.2, because that means then that 2A is 8.4, which is less than 9.2. So therefore, A has to be greater than 4.6. So we can say 4.7, because that allows 2A to be 9.4. If that's the case, what's the range? The greatest minus the smallest. So we have 9.4 minus 3.7. And that yields 5.7. And so we can, just like that, knock off answer choice A and B because they're too low. So we're finding kind of the range, the limits. Now we can say, well, what if A has to be less than 8.5, but what if it's 8.4?
That's a good strategy.
Okay, we have 3.7, 4.1, we have A, we have 8.5, we have 9.2, and we have 2A. The key here, these are in ascending order, so smallest and greatest. So for instance, what does that mean? Well, I can't come in here and say, well, A is 4, because it has to be greater than 4.1. I also can't come in here and say A is 4.2, because that means then that 2A is 8.4, which is less than 9.2. So therefore, A has to be greater than 4.6. So we can say 4.7, because that allows 2A to be 9.4. If that's the case, what's the range? The greatest minus
one
the
or more.
smallest. So we have 9.4 minus.
All right, so these are the
and that yields
answers.
5.7. And so we can, just like that, knock off answer choice A and B because they're too low. So we're finding kind of the range, the limits. Now we can say, well, what if A has to be less than 8.5, but what if it's 8.4? Put in 8.4 here, we get 16.8. Again, the range is 16.8, the greatest minus the smallest, 3.7. And that gives us 13.1. So here is as great as the range can be. So just like that, we can knock out answer choice F, and that leaves us with C, D, and E, which are 3 answers.
Tally up the number correct you got on the pretest before you saw the guidance, tally up the number correct you got on the post test after you saw the guidance. What's that? Well, I'll take a look at it after. But. All right. So write down your total correct for each section. Again, these are the answers. That's not what it's asking. It's asking the range. Does that make sense now? Okay. See, they're trying to trick you. Tricky. And once you tally up your score, I'm going to convert your score to a GRE score. And how well you did may surprise you. In a good way. Sorry? Sure. All right. So we got our totals. Okay. So here's how we convert your raw scores from 1 to 5 on each section to GRE scores, which range from 130 to 170. Okay, so if you had, and what I have here, I mean, are score ranges. Okay, so if you got a 3 on verbal, for example, then we would estimate your GRE score to be somewhere between 151 and 158. Okay. And you're going to have 2 of these scores, one for the pre-test, one for the post-test. And then, of course, one for the verbal, or a set of 2 for the verbal, a set of 2 for the quantitative. The way I figured this out, by the way, if you're interested, so there's a paper and pencil version of the GRE. It has 50 verbal reasoning questions, 50 quantitative reasoning questions. And what happens is if you take that paper and pencil version, you can use this table here to convert, the number of correct you got to projected GRE scores. Okay, so I just gave you a random sample of 5 questions that ranged in difficulty for each of the sections, 5 questions in ranging in difficulty for each of the sections, and then use this table to generate projected GRE score ranges. Okay, and they're pretty wide ranges because I'm just using a few items to project your score, right? The GRE Power Prep software that you've either done or will be taking is going to be a more reliable estimate of your GRE scores right now. Okay, but these are how we would project your GRE score. Okay. One thing I'd like to point out, a score of 154 is really good. A score of 154 is really good. So if you got a 3 on verbal, that's really good. That's awesome. Either pre-test or post-test. Same thing for math. If you got a 3, you're in really good shape, pre-test or post-test. Okay. Hopefully it makes you feel a little bit better. So these are the median scores for acceptance into Masters in Clinical Psychology programs and PhD programs in clinical psychology. You see here the actual GRE scores and then percentiles next to it. So this is a good baseline for you to aim for. Now, how high of a GRE score do you need if you're going into Masters of Clinical Mental Health Counseling, Masters in School Counseling, or Masters in Social Work? How high of a GRE score do you need? You probably don't need to take the GRE if you're going into those. You say, oh, sick? Yeah, that's cool. Many of these programs don't require the GRE unless you have a low GPA, like less than 2.75. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. So, for example, the clinical mental health counseling program here doesn't require the GRE. If you look through that spreadsheet of K-CREP accredited programs that one of my students created, that'll show you that the vast majority of places don't require the GRE. Most social work programs don't require the GRE. So something to keep in mind, if you don't want to go into a master's of clinical psychology or a doctoral program in clinical psychology, you're probably not going to take the GRE. Save your money and your time. Now, let's do a reflection. Hopefully you improved on the post-test. Who improved on the post-test in some way? Okay, thank God. Thank God it worked. That's like the worst fear as an educator, like the activity doesn't work, you know? Okay, now why do you think you improved? And then also, how close were your post-test scores to the standards for master's and doctoral programs in clinical psychology? Take a moment to reflect to that. How do you study for the GRE? Let's keep in mind the things that we've already learned. One is that we cannot remember information that we don't encode because we're not paying attention, due to distractions, being fatigued, things of that nature. I actually think just the level of fatigue in the room probably had some impact on your scores today. In terms of studying, keep in mind the spacing effect, right? You want to space out your studying with distributed practice. The more you space out your studying, the better you retain that information in the long term, right? So space out your studying for the GRE and the 3 to 5 months before the test begins. And then also cram on top of that. Because cram, you're going to remember well in the short term. So then the question becomes, what do you cram? You cram vocabulary words. Okay. So you're going to be doing distributed practice, spaced studying for a period of a few months, and then the day or two before the exam, you're going to be cramming and spending a ton of time memorizing vocabulary words so that you have them fresh in your memory. Yep. You want to memorize like 1,000 to 1,500. It's not that bad. Put your mind to it. You can do it. Keep in mind that practice testing is effective. Testing yourself. You can do this with flashcards. It's a great strategy, particularly for learning vocabulary. Take practice tests. Taking practice tests alone improves your GRE scores and any standardized test score by about 10%. If you did nothing other than take 6 or 7 practice tests, you'd improve your scores that much. And as we talked about, this is effective because you're simulating the same process that you're going through while you're in the test when you're practice testing, and you're making that retrieval route much more easier for information to navigate. Use deeper levels of practicing. Avoid shallow levels of processing. Avoid just reading through materials, highlighting, that sort of thing. Practice testing is going to be the most effective way of doing this. Keep your mindset in mind. Have a growth mindset, right? It's easy, especially if you didn't do well today, or if you've done poorly in the past on a standardized test, to say, I'm not a good standardized test taker, I can't do this. That's a fixed mindset. It's understandable, but it's a fixed mindset. Better to have a growth mindset that, okay, I may be a great standardized test taker right now, I may not have a great score right now, but I can get there if I'm determined enough and I put in that effort. Okay. How long should you study? First thing you're going to do is what's been assigned to all of you, which is to take a good practice test. The Power Prep software is put out by the test makers as actual test questions is going to be the best estimate of your score. So you're going to take that. That's going to be your initial estimate of your score. Then you're going to pick a target score based on the statistics for recent admissions into the programs that you want to go into. Subtract your target score from your actual score. This sounds like a GRE question. Divide the difference by 5, multiply by 40. This is about how many hours you will need to study. In other words, it takes about 40 hours of good focused studying to raise your score about 5 points. So if I need a 160 on verbal and I'm at a 150, I'm going to need to put in 80 hours. If I need a 155 on quant and I'm at a 150, I'll need to study for 40 hours. So in this scenario, overall, I'd have to put in about 120 hours of good studying, smart studying, using distributed practice, cramming at the right moment, good materials, in order to get to where I want to go. So, how do you feel about studying for long periods like this, 100 or 200 hours for the GRE? And then how might that reflect your willingness to study or not study? Or how might your willingness to study or not study reflect your interest in graduate school? And let's just discuss this. We don't have to write anything down. All right, so how do you study for this? This is a question that came up. The test creator has a bunch of free resources that are also very good because they have real questions that have been used in the past, right? Those are going to be your best practice aids. The educational testing services, the people who make the GRE, also have pretty inexpensive paid resources, which are free, by the way, if you qualify for the reduced fee GRE. There's a lot of good resources on YouTube. There's YouTube stuff. This Magoosh GRE, they have some really good examples for the math problems in particular. And then just get yourself a good book to study. My advice is to Google. It's like never good for an educator to say Google it. Amazon Top Books GRE. Okay, that's what I did when I was a student. And what you'll see is the bestsellers. Okay, here we have this. I pulled this up a year ago, or about 6 months ago. Bestsellers in GRE test guides. You know, get yourself one or two of the better books. You know, spend $20 on it. It's like $20. This one's 20, 25, 25. Not too bad. And they have used versions as well. All right. For the verbal section, did you have a question? Or you just... Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a lot of money in this testing business. For verbal, the most important aspect of your studying is memorizing vocabulary of words that are, and not just any vocabulary. Don't just go into the dictionary and memorize all the A's or whatever. Memorize words that are commonly on the GRE, and you'll find that in the test materials list on Amazon. Figure on memorizing about 1,500, 2,000 of those words with a heavy amount of studying in the days prior to the exam. So cram those vocabulary words. For quantitative, find a good book and resources. What you'll see is that these problems use pretty basic math, high school level math, and you'll find themes in certain types of questions that reoccur, and you'll pick up on those themes as you complete the practice problems and a lot of practice problems. And be sure you know the formulas, those basic formulas like pi r squared, and I don't know, the Pythagorean theorem and all those. And they have a list of those commonly used formulas in the books that you can get online. Yes? No, well, yes. I mean, quantitative reasoning is definitely a part of like the statistical aspects of psychology in particular. But no, the actual high school math, no, I've never used it again. I couldn't answer the question, so. All right, do I need a GRE course? No. But if you want to pay for it and you think the structure will help, it can't hurt. And then one of the last topics that we'll talk about here is stereotype threat, which can be a factor, a psychological concept that basically in a test-taking situation, when a negative stereotype is activated, it hurts the person's performance. Okay, it could be because the person puts forth less effort, or in other words, they may think subconsciously or consciously, well, I'm not any good at math, or I'm not any good at these tests, and then so they don't put in full effort, and so they could self-handicap, which will hurt their scores. Or it could mess with your concentration during the test as well, which would hurt your scores. So this has been an area of research in standardized testing that's been pretty widely studied. The stereotype for women is that women aren't good at math. And so what can happen, for females in particular, not all females, there's individual differences, right? But what can happen with females is that they do worse in the math section because of the stereotype, or thinking about the stereotype that women aren't as good at math. Thus, why put in the effort? And also it can mess with concentration during the test, cause some anxiety that messes with concentration. And we also see this stereotype threat contributing more generally to white, non-white mean differences in SAT scores. So we'll watch a video on this to give you a little bit more background.
Are men better than women in science? Are certain races smarter? Those are the stereotypes, but now some psychologists say stereotypes can become self-fulfilling prophecies.
What's the ratio here of cute guys to, me?
Ever see this ad depicting a ditzy woman trying to get into college?
What are your plans for the future?
When are the homecoming queen elections?
One study showed that women who watched ads like this before taking a math test scored 38% lower than women who didn't see the ad. The Kaplan Education and Test Prep Company helped us run similar tests. And sure enough, in our unscientific test, the women who saw the sexist commercials did worse. Some later told us they found those results hard to believe. It's so powerful that just watching the dumb ad could make a difference?
No. I don't think so.
The women in your group did worse.
The only way for it to work is that you have to internalize it. I guess you don't know what's really affecting you, which is creepy in and of itself.
The stereotype effect has been found in study after study, says NYU psychology professor Joshua Aronson.
We found that just reminding the women that they were college students at a selective college overcame the gender gap. However, when we remind them that they're women, the gap widens.
You tell Asians that, remember, Asians do well in math?
Yes.
Their scores go up?
Yes.
Then what does the stereotype that blacks test poorly do to a black person who's about to take a test?
The situation of taking an IQ test for a black kid is so loaded that it's not a direct measure of their intelligence.
He found he could change blacks' test scores simply by saying different things before the test.
Tell people taking that test that this isn't a test at all, it's a puzzle. The black students' scores jump dramatically. Mindset matters.
That was also found in golf experiments, as demonstrated here, done by Jeff Stone at the University of Arizona.
The test is designed to measure personal factors correlated with natural athletic ability.
First, black and white students are told a miniature golf game tests athletic ability.
Natural athletic ability, natural athletic ability.
After hearing that, blacks perform better. Blacks, after all, have heard plenty about blacks being natural athletes.
I'm confident in my ability, so when I heard it was a test of that, I was like, okay, well, I know I'm going to score somewhere in the high range to see how high I can go with this.
Oh! But when students were told the golf game is a test of intelligence,
The test is designed to measure personal factors correlated with sports intelligence.
his study found the black scores were 18% worse. Some of this research showing that stereotypes can become self-fulfilling prophecies was inspired by Jane Elliott's surprising experience.
It might be interesting to judge people today by the color of their eyes. Would you like to try this?
Almost 40 years ago, this Iowa schoolteacher decided she'd show the kids what it was like to live with discrimination. So she divided her classes by eye color. ABC happened to be there to film one of her tests.
I mean, the blue-eyed people are the better people in this room. Oh, yes, they are. This is a fact. Blue-eyed people are better than brown-eyed people.
She had the so-called inferior brown-eyed group wear these identifying collars. She told them they were lazy and slow, and they'd have shorter recess.
Brown-eyed people are not to play with the blue-eyed people on the playground.
The kids' behavior soon changed. Brown-eyed kids were miserable. The next day, she reversed the roles.
Yesterday, I told you that brown-eyed people aren't as good as blue-eyed people. That wasn't true. The truth is that brown-eyed people are better than blue-eyed people.
Then she gave them a flashcard test.
Okay, you want to be timed this morning? Yeah.
After the brown-eyed kids had been labeled inferior, it took them 5 minutes to finish the flashcards. But the next day, when they were the superior group, they finished in half the time.
I had no idea that you could change a child's academic performance. It never occurred to me that that would really work. On the day the kids were on the top, their academic performance was better than it had ever been before in my classroom.
You went faster than I ever had anyone go through this hard task.
When you're told you're superior, you act up to that.
But the children she treated as inferior that day did much worse.
I set them up to fail, and they failed.
4 minutes and 18 seconds. I know we weren't going to make it. How long did it take you yesterday?
3 minutes.
The inferior group of kids seemed deeply affected by the day's test.
I said, "Do you want to take these collars off?" And she said, "It wouldn't make any difference." And I said, "Why? What do you mean?" She said, "We'll still have these eyes." Honey, it isn't my fault you're stupid.
Today, Elliot does this exercise with older students, again discriminating against half the class based on eye color.
Would you like me to go get my paper and pencil?
I wouldn't like you in any way, shape, or form.
They know it's just an exercise, but being treated as inferior still has a powerful effect.
Persecuted her for standing out. Persecuted him for standing out. The only change that ever happens is when people stand out, and I step back.
The good news, researchers say, is that if students and teachers are just aware of the stereotype effect, they're on their way to overcoming at least part of it.
And if you aren't aware, you'll let it happen, and you'll take that in, and it will become part of your psyche. You don't have to take it in. It's time to kill the stereotypes.
Does the color of eyes that you have make any difference in the kind of person you are?
All right. So I want all the blue-eyed people on this side of the room and all the brown. I'm just kidding. Charles was half asleep. He's like, "What did you just say?" Okay. So ways to counteract stereotype threat. Be aware that it exists. And this is like a clinical concept in general, is people have a tendency to internalize and personalize their emotions and their experiences, but there's many times where our emotions and our experiences are actually, we're feeling them for reasons completely unrelated to our emotions and experiences, or unrelated to us. So if you know, okay, the stereotype threat thing exists, and I feel anxious, and you're able to say, okay, this anxiety that I feel, or insecurity or whatever, it's due to that. It's due to this thing called stereotype threat. That helps reduce the impact of it, because now you've depersonalized it. Mindfulness exercises are good in general. For mindfulness is meditation. And the way mindfulness meditation works is all you do is just mentally note all of the things going on around you in terms of your senses. So it would be something like, this desk feels cold. I see dots in the ceiling. The light is bright. It's white. The air feels cold. I can hear the sound of my voice. You know, basically all the concrete things around you that you can sense, you just make note of and observe mentally. Don't do it out loud because people will think something's wrong. You do it mentally to yourself, and that calms you and it centers you. Okay. Also, you can watch videos of successful people from your demographic group, and just to take a more individualistic approach. Visualize past situations where you have been successful, you've overcome whatever difficulties you've had. That can be helpful as well. So a lot of this comes down, a lot of success in general comes down to the mindset that you have. Okay. All right, finally, psychology subject GRE, very briefly. We have the general GRE, and then there's a psychology subject GRE that some programs require. This, in contrast to the general GRE, is a paper and pencil test, and it's only given 3 times a year. Okay, so you have to time it correctly. These are the areas covered by a psychology subject GRE. One thing I forgot to mention about the general GRE is you can, they have test centers all over the place, and you just schedule time to go take it, like pretty much any day of the week. But you're only allowed to take it once per calendar month. You're only allowed to take the general GRE once per calendar month. So you can, if you take it on November 1st, you can't take it on November 31st because that's in the same calendar month. But if you take it November 31st, you could take it December 1st because even though they're a day apart, they're different calendar months. In terms of percentage of programs requiring psychology subject GRE, we see that here, and then the median score for admitted students, it's $150. How do you study for the psychology GRE? You want to get a book, but there's different books, okay? We're almost done, I promise. There's different books. Some are like relatively comprehensive and like thick books to study, and then some are relatively thin books to study where it's just like more superficial overview of the concepts. Get one of those superficial, shallow ones, because you don't need to be an expert in the content. You don't need the giant, dictionary-sized book. You just need to have a basic understanding of the psychological concepts that you'll get and actually be able to study in a more efficient way with a shallow description. And then basically you're going to go through that book, put an X through everything you already knew, and then for the topics that you didn't know, make flashcards and study them until you know them. There's other standardized tests that you may have to take: LSAT for law school, MCAT for medical school, and then a GMAT for some other programs, particularly education. Same sorts of study strategies apply to those. Questions?